StoryHinge, Episode 73, Alexa Bigwarfe, Bigger Than Self.
That having a purpose bigger than me has been tremendous in my growth as a human in general, but also in healing. I think the biggest and most important thing is that almost nothing is unique. We all have a unique personal story, but there's somebody else who has had a story that is very, very similar. And one of the most important things that I feel about sharing my story is to try and help, even if it's just one person or 10 people or 100,000 people, trying to help them in their worst moment, realizing, okay, somebody else went through this and look how far they've come.
Welcome to StoryHinge. At StoryHinge, we explore foundational ideas and beliefs. We believe everyone has a beautiful story to grow. Now here's your host, Jason Vidaurri.
Welcome everyone to StoryHinge. Hope you guys are having a great week out there. Today we have an exciting guest. We're going to be talking with Alexa Bigwarfe. Some years ago, she lost one of her twin daughters to twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. And she's going to share about that and some of her insights on the healing process. And also, I guess, what she did with that experience in terms of advocacy and supporting nonprofit organizations to help others. And I really admire her in that work and really turning something negative into a strong positive. So with that, Alexa, welcome to StoryHinge.
Good job. Thank you. That's a hard name to get right.
Well, I'm glad we reviewed that once before we started talking. So, yeah. I'm excited to talk to you, Alexa, and hear, I think you have some challenging parts of your history, your story, and that have been helpful to other people as you've shared that. And why don't we start back there and hear it about, I guess, becoming a mother another time and how that went for you.
Yeah. So, my story, I guess my life completely flipped upside down. We had a fairly normal American life, I suppose. We had 2 kids. My husband and I were both working full time. I was working a very demanding job in Homeland Security and decided I was going to stay home with my kids. And we were like, well, we're almost 35. We've talked about having another child. We should move on this. So we decided to have our 3rd child. And just weeks really after stopping working full time, I found out that I was pregnant. Went into the doctor, and lo and behold, they noticed that there were 2 heartbeats, which was a complete and utter surprise to us. So we don't have twins in either of our families. So it had never even popped up as a topic of conversation. But it turns out that anybody who can have a baby can have twins because they don't know why the egg splits. And we had identical twins. They were started off as 1, split into 2. And along the pregnancy, we learned about, at 20 weeks gestation, when I went in, they found that the babies were suffering from what's called twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. And this is a syndrome that impacts identical twins. They share a placenta, and the placenta divide basically isn't equal. So one baby was receiving entirely too much fluid, and the other baby wasn't receiving enough. So we basically had one that was being overloaded by extra fluids, which caused her heart to have a lot of issues. She started building up fluid around her heart and in her abdomen and other important areas of her body. And the other one was basically completely growth restricted and barely growing at all. So a really dangerous syndrome that is 100% fatal if not treated. In fact, my doctor told me that day that they thought both babies would die. So we went through the next 10 weeks doing all kinds of procedures and in and out of the hospital. I spent the last 4.5 weeks of my pregnancy in the hospital, and the babies were born at 30 weeks. We had just crossed the threshold where the little one was big enough to survive. Even though we were 30 weeks, she was the size of a 24-weeker. So she was born at 1 pound, 10 ounces. And although they were identical and should have been exactly the same, the other one, because she'd been receiving so much fluid, was almost 5 pounds. But she had a lot of extra buildup in her system, and they were never able to stabilize her. Her heart wasn't functioning. Her lungs were underdeveloped in her abdomen that stopped them from growing. And fortunately, they were not able to stabilize her, and she passed away after 2 days. And the other baby, who is now thankfully a very happy, healthy, and rambunctious 6-year-old, spent 12 weeks in the NICU. So we were really faced with two really horrific situations all at the same time: the loss of one child, and then spending all that time in the NICU, which is not a fun experience for any family.
No, definitely. We have 6 kids over here, so we've been through the pregnancy and having a baby and all that several times, and
Wow.
it's they're all unique. They've all been different,
Yes.
and it's such an exciting time. So, but having this, this hard part going at the same time. What was it like for you? I guess take us into that moment a little bit, and maybe a moment or two somewhere along that line, and what was that like, and what was it like for you and your family?
It was, probably the worst time of our lives. I think I can easily say. We had a little boy who was 4, had just turned 4, and then we had another daughter who turned 2 weeks after the babies were born. So I was torn between trying to spend time with my 2 little munchkins at home and then wanting to be in the NICU as much as possible. So for that time frame, I would drop the kids off at a babysitter. I would spend all day long in the NICU with the little one, watching her grow and hoping that she was okay. We went through some pretty rough patches with her just because of her size and the challenges that babies born that small have. From the grief perspective, like it was horrible. Like anyone who's been through PTSD, I mean, every day for 12 weeks, I had to walk by the place where I held my daughter for the very last time. And so we were very relieved when we were actually able to go home. But my husband, he would work a full day at work. He at the time was driving almost an hour to his place of work. So he would leave work, he would go to the hospital, he would give our daughter her evening bottle, and wasn't getting home until 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night. So we were exhausted. We weren't sleeping very much. We had 2 little children who, were at very demanding ages, and obviously a baby that we were very concerned about, who had a lot of complications and special needs for that first year of life, really, that had to be handled. So it was really hard. And I would say that in terms of like dealing with grief, I didn't actually really deal with that until probably about 9 months out, when it felt like we were okay with the other baby, that she was going to make it, that everything was good. And then I was able to start processing all that had happened. So, people talk about how quickly they expect mothers to kind of bounce back from the loss of a baby. But in reality, like, I didn't even start dealing with her death until almost a year afterwards because of everything else going on in our lives. So it was a rough first year. It feels like I was in a complete fog during that time frame. Like I look back and it's like watching an out-of-body experience or something, just trying to remember those days. And thankfully we are far outside of them and trying to do what we can to take the good and the bad and make the best to move forward, really.
Yeah, well, I imagine people ask you all the time, I guess, what advice would you give to someone who's going through, a challenging time like that, with maybe losing a child, and now that you've had some time and to process it yourself?
For me, it was, I started blogging, actually, and now I help people write through their grief to find ways to capture those emotions in writing, which is a very healthy and healing thing to do. But really, I mean, what I tell people when I find out that they're just going through that is I just remind them to breathe and to take one day at a time, and help them to realize that, there will come a time, they have to get through this part, but there will come a time when life will normalize again. It's a different kind of normal. But taking that experience and what happened to us, and then seeing other friends go through it afterwards, I decided that I wanted to be more of a part of helping people get through that. So I reached out to a bunch of other parents who I knew had lost, and all kinds of different losses of children. So from early pregnancy losses all the way to a 12-year-old who was killed in a very freak accident one afternoon. And we put together a book called Sunshine After the Storm, a survival guide for the grieving mother. And it's meant to provide hope and encouragement and different stories from the perspectives of moms and a few dads to kind of just be a beacon of light or a source of encouragement that just lets them know they're not alone, and that while what they're going to is a unique experience to them, there are other people who have experienced it and survived it, and give our best advice and tools and resources and try and help them get through the worst of it so that they can find, the sunshine after the storm, that they can find hope and encouragement again one day in their future. And just to know that one day wounds don't ever go away, but they do heal.
That makes sense. No, I love that you've turned that experience into something that you can now use to help other people. And that seems, in what you said there, it seems so fundamental for humans for us to have, when we're going through something like that, just to have someone else out there say, "Hey, I hear you. You're not alone," and that there's, other people have experienced something similar to you as well. And that just, I think it really helps us along the way a lot, I guess. And have you found anybody that, going through that has, well, let me back up. I guess I want to ask you first on, you mentioned starting to write about this. What did that do for you as you started writing your blog about this?
So, it did a lot of things for me, actually, because there were a lot of things, a lot of topics that I felt like I couldn't really express in words, or, people are funny. We seem to have a threshold for what we allow for people. And I felt like there became a point where people would ask me how things were going. And if I started to, they would get really uncomfortable when I started to really give an honest answer, and also, like, once other people's lives got back to normal, they kind of just expect that your life would too. So a few months out, if someone would ask me how things were going, and I found that people would get like super uncomfortable and get real nervous and things like that. So blogging really helped me say a lot of the things that I felt like I needed to get out, but that I couldn't necessarily say to people without making them uncomfortable. And it really helped me. But then I also started to realize that not only was there a need to help other people who were going through this, there was a need to help other people who wanted to help people going through it. So I really started to focus a lot of my writing on things to say and not say when you know someone who's lost a baby, things that you can do to help someone in the aftermath of losing a baby. And really, those are my two most popular blog posts to this day. And that's been almost 6 years since I've written them, because people just get super awkward and they have no idea what to do. And unfortunately, a lot of people wind up just kind of ignoring it or not doing anything at all. Or, I lost some relationships because people just didn't even acknowledge anything that had happened. And in talking to people over the years, I've found that it's largely because people are scared of hurting you, or they're scared of saying something that will cause you more pain. But I can assure you that there's nothing that you can say other than some of the really stupid things people say, like, well, you could have another baby, you brought one home, or you could get a dog. I mean, those are just stupid things. And I talk about that but you can do things like, I'm sorry. While I'm sorry does, some people still get upset with that. But in general, opening up and saying, your baby mattered. We remember your baby. We love you. We love your baby, and allowing the moms to talk if they want to talk. Some people don't want to talk, but some people, if you give them the opportunity to talk, they will talk and talk and talk about that baby, because it's so important to them that that baby is real and that other people recognize it as real. So that's really how it helped me a lot, was recognizing that there was something that I could do to help grieving parents by helping other people know how to help them,
Well, that's good. Let's dive into that a little bit more and hear about some other things, because I acknowledge it myself. If I had someone close that, it's maybe not even a loss of a baby, but just in something tragic, you feel that awkwardness and saying, how do I approach them?
Absolutely.
So you mentioned some things there already on what we could do. Do you have any advice on how we approach someone like that?
So the biggest advice that I give people, other than, allowing the person to talk about it if they want to, is huge. And just kind of letting them know you love them and you're thinking about them, even if it's just a text message, just don't ignore them. Just send something that says, you may not want to talk right now. I'm here for you. I'm here to listen. If you need me, I'm here. But then also, one of the things that I found super overwhelming was when people would reach out, which was a good thing, but they'd say, how can I help you? I was having a hard time making sure that all of us had clean underwear on that day. I didn't want to take on the burden of trying to figure out how to help people help me. So what I often advise people to do is to say, there are things you can do without that person's permission to help them that will make all the difference. Drop a meal off at their house one day, and not just in the first week, but in the months or whatever, or see if there's a service you can arrange for them. If you can, like a housekeeper or something like that, see if you can give them some gift cards that will help them with, there's a lot of expenses that come along with funeral preparation. If it's to that point, if it's an earlier miscarriage or things of that nature, their needs will be different. But for the most part, no matter when the loss is, people kind of shut down for a while and they just need help with basic things, getting their kids to and from school, getting the house clean, getting meals prepared, paying the bills. I mean, all of those types of things, depending on your level of comfort with the person and your level of knowledge with the person. But, no matter how well or little you know them, it's not hard to drop off a meal or buy a gift card to the grocery store or buy a gift card to a Olive Garden or something like that. So on a night when they just are overwhelmed, they can just call in a delivery or something of that nature. I found those things to be super helpful, so that on the days when I was overwhelmed and the last thing I wanted to do was figure out what I was going to cook for dinner that night, I could say, you know what, tonight we're ordering pizza, and thank you, Chris or whomever who sent us a gift card to Papa John's, so
Yeah.
those small things help a lot.
No, that's really good. I mean, as I hear you describe all that, it sounds like so basic, like just being a real human, reaching out, connecting,
exactly.
saying, I love you, I'm here. And then maybe taking a step and saying, I'm going to go do something for you. I don't need your permission to go do this. I'm just going to, lend a hand and help you out somewhere. Huh. Very
exactly.
Good. All right. So, Alexa, where does that story go to? Maybe leading up more to today. And because this was several years ago, I believe, right?
It was 6 years ago, in December. They were born in December of 2011. So I mentioned the book. So that happened, actually. The story behind that is I had started blogging and was writing things about how to help a grieving mother. And when my daughter, my surviving twin, was about 18 months old, a good friend of mine delivered a stillborn baby at 36 weeks. And several of our friends had either experienced infant loss or pregnancy loss of some sort. And we were at the funeral and we were standing around, the 4 or 5 of us who had been through something like this. And we were just like, how can we help her get past this moment of just pure, just the worst. It's the worst. You can't even imagine anything ever being good in your life again at that moment. And that's kind of when the idea was born, to put together this book to help somebody in that moment, whether they read it then or 6 months later or a year later or whenever. So that's when I started writing the book. And then our whole goal was to be able to, not to sell, we do sell the book to raise money to give the book away, basically. But we wanted to be able to donate it to hospitals and bereavement groups and the NICU and places like that, so that when a family came into the hospital, for example, and had lost a baby, then they were given a copy of that book. And so then that didn't feel like enough for me. I wanted to do more. So I established a nonprofit. And so that if someone had lost a baby, they could come onto the website, Sunshine After the Storm, and request a book to be sent to them free of charge, because I didn't want a mother to ever have to buy the book if she needed it. And so I'm sending out these books to people, and I was thinking, this just isn't enough. I want to do more. So I started adding little things, and before you know it, we're sending full-on care packages when we were getting a request from people. And we would put in just little things to help the mom get comfort and to take care of herself a little bit, to have some things that might help her, things that helped me shiny nail polish. I mean, it's a silly example, but little things that brought like color and life back into my life. I had come across this woman who did this muchness campaign. She had actually lost both of her twins from twin to twin transfusion, and she wanted to help women who'd been through a loss like that regain their muchness, as she called it. So it was a campaign to like help people work through it and find the things that made them feel good again. And from her perspective, she loved everything like glittery and sparkly and fun. So I started, you know, wearing sparkly nail polish and wearing crazy socks, like bright colored socks and warm fuzzy socks, and putting on, you know, just little things like lotions or taking a bath with it. So I was putting together all these little things in care packages to send to them just to try and add a little bit of spark back into, you know, a gray day, you know. And so we moved on with that. We started doing it, but I still had 2 small children at home, and I was trying to balance that life of being a grieving mother and helping other grieving mothers while also being a normal mom to 3 little children. And it just kind of, the way my life evolved, I started blogging more on parenting topics, and it started off as a parenting blog on how to raise 3 other kids while I'm dealing with the loss. And then it kind of gradually moved into generic parenting stuff. So I separated those 2 out because I never wanted somebody to come to my blog who had just suffered a loss of a child and then the next post be like, and today my 3-year-old did so and so and so. So, you know, so I made that a completely different thing. I co-authored a book with another parenting blogger called Lose the Cape: Realities from Busy Modern Moms and Strategies to Survive. And then we launched a podcast. So it, you know, it incorporates loss and miscarriage and infant loss and those types of things into it, because unfortunately those are parts of motherhood, but it's the bigger picture parenting. And kind of, you know, it evolved, and then I started publishing more books, and I started learning the ins and outs of publishing. And only this last year, I actually, sorry to kind of jump around here a little bit at the timeline, but I actually took a little bit of a step back. I found it to be very, very overwhelming, because there was a point in time where every day or at least once a week, I was receiving a message from somebody who said, my girlfriend's baby just died, or this happened, or this happened. I had become the person that everybody came to when their baby died, and it was just too much. It was too much. So I took a step back a little bit from the grief things until I could get my head around it. And only in this last year have I come full circle. And now, with the things that I've learned through writing and publishing, I started to do a Right to Heal type program where I have a free 5-day challenge for someone who has experienced a loss to kind of teach them some of the tools about writing through their loss. And then I help other people publish their stories who have an important story that they need to share. So we've done some books on grieving parents. We published a very beautiful book by Amy Lands. It's called Navigating the Unknown. And her infant died from a very rare disease, I think 33 days after life. And she at the time was looking for resources on how to plan a funeral for a baby, how to do this and how to do that. And so she put together a book that is for parents who have received an end of life diagnosis for a baby, and all the resources that you need to navigate the unknown of that horrific experience. So it's been a really, you know, you asked me some of the things that I have done and that I recommend to other people, really getting involved in helping in some way, shape, or form, helping either through the care packages or helping people share their stories or helping people find an outlet through writing to deal with some of their grief, giving back to our community, being really engaged in community service and philanthropic organizations like the March of Dimes and things like that. Having a purpose bigger than me has been tremendous in my growth as a human in general, but also in healing.
That's really good. Well, as I'm hearing you say all that, I'm like, wow, Alexa, you're cranking out all kinds of work and doing all this and that. How do you, I guess maybe 2 sides of that. Where did that drive come from? Instead of, you know, some of us, you know, might go through grief and we just want to withdraw and not reach out. I guess, where did that come from? And then how do you mentioned balance in there. How do you work through that and try to balance all that out without getting overwhelmed? If you have any advice for that.
I get this question a lot. That probably doesn't surprise you. I think for me, I had to stay busy to stay alive. And I don't mean like I was on the verge of suicide or anything like that. And I don't mean to make light of that. I went through a very, very depressed time frame. I did reach out to my doctor, though, almost immediately and said, I think I'm going to need some help. And I did go on an antidepressant. And I am a big fan of people who are going through a really hard time to ask for help, because sometimes you need it. And we can have the debate all day long whether pharmaceuticals are good for people or not, but sometimes people need just that extra little bit of help. And so I was on antidepressants for quite a while, and that kind of helped me push through the initial depression time, but then really getting really busy and just being occupied all the time and having a mission that I needed to fulfill, it kept me moving forward. It kept me having something. And for me, like, it was so, and is still so important for me to keep Catherine in the forefront of our lives, to keep that legacy that we want to fill, of making the world a better place, of making her 2 days on this world matter. That continues to drive me and continues to push me forward to do things. And like with the March of Dimes, for example, we have a March for Babies team. We were in the NICU between December and March of 2012. And we were seeing the signs for the March for Babies. So I asked some of the nurses what it was, and they told me about the March of Dimes and said that that's the main organization in the United States and globally that does research and funding for healthy babies and for babies born too early and with birth defects. And it turns out that the money that they have raised and the research that they have done incredible things for babies across the board, with all the newborn screening initiatives that they've put in place that are now 50 states wide, where you have, I think there's 39 mandatory tests now that happen after a baby's born that rule out all kinds of things that may not be apparent. Like there's a little pulse oximeter. It's just a little thing they can put on the baby's finger, and it measures their heartbeat and heart rate, and it can identify immediately if there's an issue. So babies' lives are being saved every day from this tiny non-invasive procedure that happens right after birth, that can save them from going home and dying from a heart defect that no one even knew that they had, right? So I got really involved in that, and that helped me immensely in those first few months, because it was right in that time frame where I was looking for something to pour my energy into. So we started raising money for the March for Babies, and we do that very actively every year. But really, really finding those things that gave meaning to her and gave me a mission on trying to make a difference. And my goal is to raise enough money for the March of Dimes that they take notice of me, because I know that money means influence. And if we can influence them enough to say, TTTS, twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, is something you guys need to be looking at and researching and investing time in, because it's resulting in the death of a lot of babies. It's resulting in babies being born really early and having a lot of problems and issues throughout their whole life, whether they survive or not. Because the list of things that happen to a baby when they're born between 24 and 36 weeks, it's just immense. I mean, the risk of brain damage and cerebral palsy and eye damage and lung damage and heart damage and all these things. So, that's been a very, very big fire under my behind, as people will say, to continue to move forward on that. In terms of balance, that's something I struggle with every single day. Because right now I find myself in a place where I'm really overwhelmed, because I have all of these heart-centered projects that I really want to do, and balancing growing a business. And now I have an almost 11-year-old, 8-year-old, and 6-year-old. And I don't want to miss these years in their lives because I'm so busy doing all this other stuff. I mean, I'm already starting as a father of 6. I'm sure you see this too, like how quickly they grow. And then you're like, why did I spend so much time, working on a blog instead of playing with my 2-year-old? And
yeah, no, that's definitely something that goes through my mind. I'm like, I get this place where I need to do some podcast work, because I want to make that a good thing. It's like, well, I need to play with the kids though too. And
right.
So yeah,
exactly.
There's that back and forth.
Yeah. So it's hard. Balance is always hard. And I think the one lesson that my daughter and her 2 days of life taught me a lot of lessons, but I think the biggest lesson that she taught me is that life is fleeting, and we don't know how much time we have. And, we have to, while it's very easy to say, oh, take advantage of this time, it's hard to be present like that all the time. So I don't want to beat myself up for the fact that I'm excited about what I'm doing and trying to build this thing and trying to work time on it. But I do try really hard to make sure that our lives are not so crazy that we still sit down every night for dinner together. We still read stories together before bed. I still want to make sure that I'm, hugging them and tucking them in and kissing them before bed. I try to volunteer at their school or go on field trips or things like that so that I'm constantly, so that they look back at their childhood and they don't think, where was mom all of this time, So
Yeah. Well,
but it's
good.
hard. You get excited on a project and you're just like, no, I have to finish this. I have to do this. I have to get 1,000 downloads a month, or, I have to hit the bestseller list, or I have to do whatever. And it's easy to make those things your top priority, but yeah.
Yeah, that's good. You mentioned a lot about story and obviously sharing some of your own story. I guess I want to hear some of your thoughts on the power of that personal story and, as you've seen it through the works you've been involved in.
So, well, it's interesting because obviously my story is a tearjerker, right? But I've been, this is tough to say without sounding like a total jerk, but I use my sad story in order to propel some of our missions forward. Like it makes a big difference if people, if they really understand the importance and the significance of different things. I try to use the story so that it will help people realize how important it is to give back, to help others, to do these things, to, make donations to the organizations where people need them, and so on and so forth. But, everybody, I think the biggest and most important thing is that almost nothing is unique. We all have a unique personal story, but there's somebody else who has had a story that is very, very similar. And one of the most important things that I feel about sharing my story is to try and help, even if it's just one person or 10 people or 100,000 people, trying to help them in their worst moment, realizing, okay, somebody else went through this and look how far they've come. Look at where they are today. Look at the good they've done to the world. Look at, and to me, that's super important. And it's not only important with sharing my own story, but it's super important with helping other people share their stories, that there is somebody else going through the same, if not identical, then a very similar situation, who just, you never know when they hear that story, when they read that story, when they read the magazine article or whatever, they're like, oh my gosh, that sounds so much like my life. I can do this. I can make it.
Yeah, that's good. I'm just kind of thinking through that. How do we get better at sharing story? And because one thing we mentioned before we were talking, I said, a lot of I'm kind of come to this place where I want us to have better story in our life. I guess both looking at our own personal story and making that better, or utilizing that better. And I guess on my own personal thing is also my story consumption in life, and and trying to make that better. You have any thoughts on that?
Well, so it's kind of cool. Technology can be a good or a bad thing, but there's a lot of different ways that we can consume because of technology. So if it's listening to podcasts like this while you're driving to work, or reading books on Audible, or listening to them on Audible, or reading on your Kindle, in the moments here and there. So there's lots of ways to consume good stories. But in terms of your question on how do we get better at sharing them, I think that it depends on comfort levels. I mean, not everybody wants to write. Not everybody wants to be a speaker at an engagement or anything like that. But it has to come from a place of wanting to share, really. And if you want to share, and if you want to try and help people, then there's all kinds of ways that you can get started, and then you can improve upon your craft. And really, for people who think that writing might be a great avenue for them, I think that if they're not ready to go public and post things on a blog where people might read it, then just starting with a journal and just sitting down and journaling out those thoughts is a great way to get that out of your system. I mean, there's tons and tons of studies about how useful journaling is in general for anybody, whether you've suffered a loss or just need some help working out whatever happened to you during that day, that sitting down and journaling for a little while is a great idea. If you do want to get your words out in front of other people, then obviously a blog or doing a podcast or something like that, even if nobody's listening to you, it's so therapeutic to just write it and to share it and to speak it and, all of those kinds of things. And then if you really want to take it to the next level where you're in front of a lot of people, then definitely writing a book and publishing a book, or trying to get on a speaker circuit, or even just like going to local events and speaking to people, all kinds of ways to share your story.
Very good. I want to make sure before we end here that people know how to get out, reach out to you and connect with you. What's the best way they can do that?
Well, I have a lot of ways to reach me. I'm on Facebook. I have my Facebook page, which is Write, Publish, Sell with Alexa Bigwarfe. So if you look up Alexa Bigwarfe on Facebook, you'll find multiple Facebook pages, groups, and all kinds of stuff. I have a free Facebook group for people who are trying to write more and publish, and that's Write, Publish, Sell. My website, my blog is catbiggie.com, and that's KATBIGGIE.com. And then my professional one for writing is Write, Publish, Sell, like WRIT, publish, sell.co. There's no M on the end of it. And I'm on most social media under the handle catbiggie, KATBIGGIE. And I chose that name, just the history behind that. Her name was Catherine Bigwarfe. And when I first started blogging, I wanted to blog anonymously because, like I said, I had a lot of things that I wanted to say to people, a lot of hurt, a lot of disappointment, a lot of things. And I was like, I'm not sure that I'm ready to just go out there and tell the world who I am. So I started the blog anonymously under the name Cat Biggie, in memory of her. And then everything has developed from that. My publishing house is now called Cat Biggie Press. And, she's part of my, like I said, I want to keep her and the legacy of her and in the legacy of making the world a better place in the forefront every single day.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I love to hear that, when someone, and so often we go through these challenges in life and I guess I see that people looking back and that they become these pivotal moments in life, and if done well, they leverage you propel your life into more meaningful living.
Yeah.
So, and I see that very much in your story, and it's very encouraging to me and inspiring, really. So, thank you for the work you do and that you're out there, trying to make a difference, make things better. So.
Thank you. So far, it's been a very rewarding journey. I mean, I would trade it all to have her, but
yeah. Well, Alexa, here before we depart here, is there any, things that we missed or maybe advice you'd like to share before we part?
Yeah, I want to say, if you haven't received this message throughout, there's a lot of different ways to get back to normal again. But just know that if you are, or if you know someone who has suffered through a horrible loss, it doesn't have to be a child, a parent, or a sibling or best friend can be just as devastating. But just know that it's okay to go. You need to grieve. You need to take the time to grieve, and you will find a happiness again, but sometimes it requires you making a choice. And, so seek out help, find things that help you, find happiness and joy in life again. Do the things that give you a bigger mission, and know that just because you move on does not mean that you forget.
Yeah, that's good. Beautiful. So Alexa, thank you for spending time with us here on StoryHinge. And we, hope your work keeps rolling forth and helping other people.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I love what you're doing here. I think it's so important to encourage people and to give that hope that there's more to life and that we can make the world a better place.
All right. I want to thank Alexa for spending time with us again here on StoryHinge. Thank you all out there for spending time with us as well. A few thoughts before we close today. I guess the one is just that, we all go through some hardships in life, and that's difficult, and that's something we don't wish for, and we don't wish on others either, but it's something that does happen. And I guess I love Alexa's example of because of that she's turned around and done good with it and really reached out to other people and helped them in their healing, and those who are trying to help others in their healing process to give insights and help in that way. And I love the idea of being involved in something greater than yourself. That seems to be very powerful for us in our human condition. If we feel like we're aligned with something bigger than us, it gives us a greater hope, a greater energy, a greater capacity to work through those trials and to push for a greater outcome. So I love that she brought that up. And I guess just along with that, the idea that we allow some of these challenges and trials in our life to work for us and to allow ourselves to grow through them, I guess is one last thought on that. So again, I want to thank you all for your support out there. I invite you to continue to support us here at StoryHinge through subscribing to the podcast, sharing it with others. We'll continue to keep this growing. And I have promised for a newsletter coming out, and that will be coming out. It looks like I'll be releasing that here in early May. It's essentially ready. I'm just going to start timing out towards the beginning of the month. I'll start releasing these. And I think with that, we'll go ahead and close for this week. You guys have a great week out there. We will talk to you next week.
Thank you for sharing with us at StoryHinge. We hope this time together has added more goodness to your journey. Until next time, onward and upward, and may your own story continue to grow more beautiful.